positive energy, passion for leadership, and a perfect representative of our 1995 class motto, which is non sibi sed patriae, which means not for self, but for country. Megan was my classmate, she was my friend, and she was an American hero. And I'll give you a couple of points that you might not have heard about our story today. Before I do so, I just wanted to say a couple of thank yous. Thank you first to Congresswoman Kim for continuing to recognize our veterans who have served, who are serving now, and who will serve in the future. Thank you also to the members of the U.S. Postal Service who will serve under Megan's flag as long as this building is named after her. Thank you also, especially, to Megan's friends and loved ones and family here. I know in speaking with you, there's many people in the audience today who are probably more appropriate. Quite frankly, some of you knew Megan better, some of you are closer to her, and I am incredibly and deeply honored to have the opportunity to speak about her. So I'm going to pick up my card here, just so I don't get too off track, because one of my classmates reminded me today of a couple of Megan's key comments about what it takes to be a good public affairs officer, and we'll talk about those in a moment. And one of those key comments is to keep things brief and on track. I will say this, the U.S. Naval Academy is one of the finest four-year universities in the world. And we admit the top men and women from this country and from around the world, and we push them to the utmost of their capabilities and beyond. And that was certainly Megan's experience and certainly my experience and the experience of the other graduates of our institution who are here today. We learned a lot of new things at the Naval Academy, our Navy as we fondly call it. We learned calculus, some of us again, and some of us still had to take it over a third time. We learned chemistry, we learned physics, and we also learned funny military terms, like the front-leaning rest. And the class of 1995 spent hours upon hours in the front-leaning rest, which some of you may fondly call the plank position, but that's not what we called it, because the Marine Corps calls it the front-leaning rest. And we pressed up and pressed down and pressed up and pressed down, and we often were ordered to recite 2 lines from a favorite poem of the Naval Academies. It's called The Laws of the Navy by Admiral R.A. Hopwood, which says, in fact, the 2 favorite lines of ours, on the strength of one link in the cable depends the might of the chain. Who knows when you may be tested? So live that thou bearest the strain. And this was in Megan's heart, and it was in all of our hearts as we worked together to prepare to go out and serve our country as young officers in the Navy and the Marine Corps and the other services that include the Air Force and the Army and the Coast Guard. We learned other terms as well. We learned a term for something called the E-course. And several of you in the room, several of you here today have had the displeasure of completing the E-course. It sounds like something fun, like an e-bike, or something kind of at least non-offensive, like maybe an email. But I can assure you, it is neither fun, and it is certainly highly offensive. The way it works is this. We begin by completing one of the most arduous obstacle courses in the world. This is at Quantico, at OCS, and at TBS, the basic school. And Megan and I spent 2 summers there together training. You start with the O course, and then just about the time you're completely gassed out and exhausted from that hard sprint, you pick up your gear and you load up your pack and your canteens and your Kevlar and your rifle, and you go out on a non-leisurely jog through the jungles of Quantico, dodging 100 obstacles as you go. There's water obstacles, and there's walls to climb over. There's walls to climb under. There's 20 yards of barbed wire to crawl under. And so we train for this. And some of you train with us We prepared and we prepared and we prepared more. At that time, I was in pretty good shape. I could run 5 miles in significantly less than 29 minutes, and I know Megan was pretty darn close to that. Anyhow, on our day at the E-Course together, which was a culminating experience of Leatherneck at the Naval Academy, really at Quantico, I pushed myself to the absolute limit. And as I finished, somewhere in the mid-60s, and I understand at that time 60 was a perfect score. I was far from that. 70 was a perfect score for a woman. 80 was a failing score. And if you didn't pass it, you didn't get the opportunity to be an officer in the Marine Corps. Period, end of story. That's the way it was. So anyhow, I ran through the jungle. I ran through the water. I ran over the wall and under the wall. And finally, I crossed the finish line. And I pull off to the side and I begin to vomit. Like not once, but like 3 times. Literally, I'm just losing my breakfast by the side of this trail while the Marine staff sergeants and gunny sergeants are looking at me with slight embarrassment and a little bit of humor. And as I'm finishing up throwing up, I stand up and I look back to the finish line, and there, racing across the line, beaming with everything she's got, is Major Megan McClung. Only she wasn't a major then. She just had the heart of a major. And I don't know if she smiled that way because she was a gymnast, but I'll tell you what, Simone Biles had nothing on Megan. Take a moment to consider the heart that beats in a chest like that. Many of us in the audience served our countries. Many of us have served other institutions. But think about what it takes to be 17 years old in Orange County, California, full of passion and excitement and intellect and capability, and to set all of those things in subservience to your country. I know a lot of 16 and 17-year-olds these days. My daughter's in the audience and she's not quite that age. But I can tell you this, very few of them, very, very few, feel the call the way that Megan McClung felt it. It was as rare in 1990 as it is today. And I am so incredibly honored to have a couple more moments to speak with you about her. The thing about Megan was that you picture a Marine Corps major, you don't necessarily picture the beaming smile and the infectious laugh. But it was those 2 traits that inspired the men and women around her, myself included, to push themselves to greater heights. She's had a class of landing ships named after her now, and this post office. And I imagine that, knowing Megan, she would be very, very humbled by that experience. She would also want us to be certain to remember that she was not alone when she died that day in 2006. Sitting beside her was Captain Patrick Quinn and Specialist Pamonti. And those men lost their lives beside Megan. And I'd like to imagine that in their final moments, they passed on to the next life with the same love of country that so many of us feel here today. I'd also like to think that Megan would find some of this a little humorous. I'm imagining that one of you, perhaps many of you, would be standing in the post office. Maybe you're returning a pair of socks to Amazon. And up there on the wall is a painting of Megan. And she's watching over all of us as we proceed through our day, as we proceed through the line. And if you were perhaps a little bit uncomfortable at having to spend the time at the post office, or maybe you were still unhappy about the socks, or maybe you were just frustrated with the return process, Megan would smile, and she would chuckle, and she would say, Can I give you a word of advice? And you might say, sure. She would say, sometimes in life, you have to be bold, be brief, and be gone. I am incredibly honored to have the chance to introduce the family members of Megan, her brother Michael, and her mom Ree. I'm going to cut the rest of my remarks short because it's more important that you hear from them. But please know this, Megan is here with us today. Her legacy lives on. She focuses us on the future of our country. God bless each and every one of you. God bless the McClung family, and God bless America. Thank you.